So you've seen. So this
Yep.
was the one that you were on.
We've lost the slides again.
I'm having fun here. I don't know what happened there. Let's try again.
Yeah, they're on the screen again.
Yeah. So that's where we were. That's what I've been trying to talk about.
Yeah.
Mass transit systems worldwide, and the benefits that they give, and the fact that can be on street or segregated alignments or underground, or all three, as they've done in Seattle and Karlsruhe, for example. And there's some nice picture examples of some of those from various places around the world, from Japan, the US, and several European countries, including the Karlsruhe experiment with automated freight delivery by tram, which I think is an exciting development to come. So study those in detail, if you will, afterwards when you get access to a copy of the presentation. So what about the United Kingdom? Well, we had lots of tramways in most towns, which was sort of constructed from the late 19th century and the early 20th century, but pretty all of them except Blackpool have been steadily abandoned between the end of World War II and the early 1960s, largely because they all required very expensive infrastructural renewals, and of course cheap oil then favoured bus. That was just the way we thought. We've been slow on metros. We've had London Underground in Glasgow for a long time, but it wasn't until 1980 that we got a new one, which was Tyne and Wear, and then in 1987 Docklands, the automated system that TfL was opened. Then we had a tram revival from 1992. Manchester Metrolink was the first, and there are now 7 systems operating with more planned. Tyne and Wear Metro were the first to operate over network rail infrastructure. That happened in 2002, and our first tram train operation started in October 2018. We've also got a number of people movers at places like Luton, mainly at airports, Luton, Birmingham, Heathrow. I don't know if you've seen the pods that take you from Terminal 5 to the car parks, but that's a very interesting potential type of system, which as yet hasn't found any sort of ability to be translated into an urban environment, largely because you've either got to operate these things with people in pedestrian areas, or you've got to build an elevated runway, which is expensive and not popular. And we've got, has that gone again? Yes, it has, hasn't it? What? I swear I'm not.
Only just then it was
doing anything.
It was doing perfectly, and then it disappeared.
Yeah, I know. I just don't know what's happening. So we were there. The new thing is VLR, which is basically very lightweight vehicles with potentially the opportunity to develop lighter and cheaper track forms. Coventry is going to be the first of those, and the centre at Dudley BCIMO is where trials and testing are going on. There's also a more rail orientated version called the Revolution vehicle, which some of you may have heard of. That's being tested at Ironbridge at the moment. Right. So let's, if I can do something without screwing it up again. So here's some of the UK systems of interest. Is on the picture number 3 at the top. There's a picture of one of the Grimsby District Light Rail cars, which was which was British Rail's, one of British Rail's tramways. The other was Swansea and Mumbles, but there was also a number of sort of pseudo trams, particularly in East Anglia, where it was very flat, and obviously that was where the inspiration for Toby the tram engine came. So not wishing to have to pay certain organisations lots of money, I've not put a picture of that up. At the bottom we have Sheffield's last tram, or should have been the last tram, in 1960, but as you see from that, Sheffield Super Tram came on stream in 1994 and has been very successful. So what's the difference between a tramway and a light railway? Not a lot, except we did have in 1996 a Light Railways Act to enable cheaper, what I call cheap and cheerful branch lines to be built, which were generally speaking part of the railway owners' gift, although many of them came under the banner of Colonel Stevens, who had a number of independent lines, which did eventually get either got closed or incorporated into the Big Four. So, and Kent and East Sussex Railway is a good example of that, although in its current form as a heritage railway, it bears no resemblance at all to its kind of operation then. Yeah, most of them closed because the areas they serve are sparsely populated, and bus competition or the increased car ownership killed them off. But some of them would seem to be coming through the Restoring Your Railway proposals, and they make a good case for a light rail, a true light rail, current light rail, or very light rail approach to revive many of these lines, and time will tell which schemes get taken forward. So there we go. At the bottom you can see the top is the metros, although I've included also the battery train, which was XLUL, is now a Class 230 Viva Rail's development, because it demonstrates that catenary free is possible, and with the proposed fast battery charging system, could reduce the need for catenary where it's too expensive to put it up, not just on the main line, but also on light rail and metro systems. At the bottom, you can see it, the prototype Parry People Mover, which sort of led to the Class 139s, which worked between Stourbridge Junction and Stourbridge. In the middle, you can see one of Colonel Stevens' quality vehicles, which I would suggest could be, and next to it is the Revolution VLR vehicle. So did Colonel Stevens invent VLR by accident before we'd even coined the term? Just an interesting aside, really, but that's just to show what's happening. So Restoring Your Railways has proved a great opportunity for looking at light rail, because the DfT has made it clear to all the promoters that they had to consider light rail options such as tram train, segregated light rail, metro, or VLR. And the picture shows some of the work that we within the Network Rail light rail team have done to try and help the promoters develop routes for some of the closed lines. The one there is the Isle of Wight, alternative ways to get into Sandown from Newport, rather than take over the Isle of Wight Steam Railway to get to revive a service between Newport and Ryde. And so that's really the sort of thing that we've been doing, and the next slide gives you some idea of the number of schemes that we are looking at. and have had some direct input to. It's not a complete list by any means, but as you can see, there's a number of sort of very rural options like Kemble's Cirencester, the Isle of Wight, moving to some fairly urban area ones like Bury Rochdale, Consett Newcastle, which may be obvious candidates to be part of either Manchester Metrolink or Tyne and Wear Metro. Wisbech and Fleetwood are ones that are being fairly well progressed at the moment. And we've been in contact with we've done a study on Wisbech which demonstrates why light rail is a good idea, because it's a line that runs through some very flat countryside and it's got rather large number of level crossings, and so therefore reopening it as a railway could be a very expensive job, whereas if you reopen it as a tramway, the crossings become road crossings, and it's a different set of rules. We've worked with the promoters on the outline business cases, which we work with the Centre of Excellence at UKTram, and DFT now have said that the Centre of Excellence is the go-to for all new light rail schemes, so they will be reviewed by a panel of experts to see whether they're viable. Unfortunately, we're still awaiting an announcement on the successful Restoring Your Railways candidates. We've been promised it since the beginning of the year, but we think we now have to wait until after the local election purda's finished. So watch this space. So looking at future potential tram train in particular, now we've proved the operation. We proved it works, and we met the objectives of the trial in Sheffield, and we are also working on updating urban rail standards to be relevant to this. So some of the schemes proposed, Manchester's what they call Tram Train Pathfinder scheme, which are sort of the precursors to a much wider set of tram train aspirations within the Manchester suburban rail area. Then South Yorkshire Super Tram will very likely take over the service to Doncaster as part of the Northern Power Rail attempt to increase capacity, heavy mainline capacity for longer distance services in Sheffield. Nottingham are very keen to look at tram train, as are, and the Blythe and Tyne route is one that ought to be linked to the Tyne and Wear Metro, but at the moment they're a bit hanging back on that. It's a bit like the West Midlands. We've had a tram train scheme in Birmingham for years, and it keeps changing from full tram train back to sort of well, we'll make some provision, but I think again with the new package that's been announced from the government, they'll start looking at some of those proposals again. St Andrews in Scotland is another interesting one, because reopening the branch line to St Andrews from Lucas, it would really make a lot more sense to be a light rail type operation, because you could extend it into the town and remove cars by having a park and ride sort of outside, a bit like we do for St Ives, and you've got, and Cardiff Valley Metro is within is being developed at the moment. We wait, the vehicles are under construction. The electrification is about to start. The Strathcarron one is an interesting one I'll come back to later, but the picture shows again how we've attempted to look at how you would integrate your tram train vehicles, in this case into Doncaster, to minimise conflict with the East Coast Main Line, and also to overcome some of the other problems like platform capacity, and the difference between low and high level platforms. So that brings us on nicely to challenges. Well, post-COVID funding is an obvious one, because we've had to struggle. All the transport industry has had to, public transport has struggled, and the government had to keep propping them up, because of the change in travel habits due to the pandemic. And clearly, what we need to do now is work out how to get people, if they want to move about, to be confident to use public transport and provide public transport to be the preferred option, along with cycling and walking, which keep you fit. So we need to look at innovation. So in embracing both the light and heavy rail technology is a good way to look at it. So you can we can be looking at light rail, metro, tramways, VLR, tram train, and all that fits into restoring your railway or new urban developments. And the promoters really should be looking at some of these things, and the industry needs to make it clear how you can do that, because one of the objectives would be to reduce the cost of a new or an existing railway, and get better value for money and better environmental value too. So we need to look at in the infrastructure. Can we reduce the costs of that? Is it possible to use a lighter weight track form if you're only going to run a light rail vehicle over it? Stations, do we really need them to be as expensive and complex as they are? Can we simplify them in the form of tram stops? The vehicle procurement process, can we get away from ordering in light rail vehicles, small numbers? Is there a way of combining orders to get economy of scale? The Germans are just led by Karlsruhe have just put an order in for 504 tram trains to cover several schemes, because it's more cost effective that way. Should we be thinking along those lines? And clearly operational issues will arise because of the interfaces between the different systems. So and that comes back to also looking at, we seem to have been very risk averse in terms of the way we've brought these things along. Can we challenge that risk of aversity to say this is a better way of doing it, and it is no less safe than the mainline railway? But to do that, we've got to expand our knowledge and competency. And one of the big issues we have in the industry is bringing new people in who will stay with us, and will gain that knowledge and become experts in the field and enable people like me to retire. So further going into some of the more detail, the vehicle track interface is key, and particularly between trams and the mainline railway, because of the difference in the wheel profile due to grooved rail. Solutions exist, but they can be a challenge. So perhaps we can that's something we can simplify, because if we use raised check rails, for example, then we can sometimes restrict vehicle types that can use the main line. On the other hand, there are other solutions like swing nose crossings for your turnouts, but can we make them cost effective? And can that be true if we're only operating a light rail vehicle? Is the track form currently suitable? Level crossings, again, light rail or tramways can enable you to have avoid the issue of having to either have incredibly complex level crossings or eliminate them altogether. This is going to be an interesting discussion with the ORR. It's clearly gauging, make sure all the vehicles fit, particularly if you've got mixed running, because often the lower sector gauge between a tram and a train, or a light rail vehicle and a train, can be different, which also affects your platform train interface, because you've also got much tighter RVAR requirements for the stepping distances on between the platform and the train. And then looking at traction power, most light rail systems are electric. Most of them at 750 volt DC, although we've got Tynaware at 1500. But so how do we integrate that, and also how do we make their electrification cheaper as well? And should we do as Birmingham has done and have OLE where you need it, and catenary free where it's either gets in the way of sensitive areas, or enables you to extend more cost effectively. And then clearly the interface, operational interfaces between systems, how can we bring those into better alignment? For those who've known anything about the system in Sheffield, it ended up with a very complex set of boundaries because of the way the link between the tramway and the railway were designed. In other words, what happened? It was designed and built before the operations people were actually consulted, and so that created significant problems. And there's, obviously, in the context of all these, there are cost issues that we need to get around. There's always this view that rail is expensive and light rail is even more expensive, yet it's not necessarily the case. But we have to take into account a number of things. I mean, light rail tends to not need the same degree of fencing as we do. So can you manage trespass cost effectively? Can we get away from having to sort of create the sort of prison wire around the and what type of fencing, if you do need it, does it have to be the most expensive? If you look at what we put on the Tinsley cord, it looks like a prison, but that's a very sensitive area because of the Highways England's sort of security level for the Tinsley Viaduct. But it shouldn't. What we've done there should not be taken as a standard approach by any means. There are better ways, and if you're going to revitalize urban transport, then using the current sort of examples that I've mentioned in restoring your railways, can we via the UK Centre of Excellence work with them to come up with not only cost-effective solutions, but ones that pass the DFT's economic tests as well, and then also can we innovate? And Skyfall is the one that is where I think there's a real opportunity to demonstrate how light rail technology can help a heavy rail operation in a very sensitive area where at the moment it's costing the Highland Council a large amount of money every year to protect the rock faces alongside Loch Carron, because the rocks keep falling on the road, which runs parallel to the Kyle of Loch Alpha Railway. And on a number of occasions, we've had to do a temporary road rail sharing, as the picture at the bottom shows. So why not make it permanent? And we've modelled this to demonstrate that it can work. And we done a risk assessment on it, and it seems to be that we've got a real opportunity here, and the next step is to seek some innovation funding to make it happen, because clearly it's not something I think the Highland Council can afford, or and at the moment I think it's one of these things. We've never done it before, so it can't work. So if you run it through the normal process, so this will be a fascinating one. Other things that need some thought. If you're gonna have raised check rails, you can't necessarily use wheel skates unless you get a new one which has got a better clearance. But is there, as I say, the swing nose crossing could be a better option, but can we make it cost effective? We also may need to look at things like hybrid modular signalling for shared operation, particularly with metros. The Thailand Weir Metro Flow project may well prove a very good test bed for this. And as I've mentioned before, can we make low cost modular stations which are DDA compliant in terms of using perhaps foot crossings rather than footbridges, and obviously meet the platform train interface requirements. We have to think too, there are social benefits to increasing rail penetration and rail solutions for integrated transport. And these are some of the ones we discovered from the Sheffield Tram train project. It improved connectivity between Sheffield and Rotherham, because people in Rotherham could now access directly Sheffield city centre by rail, whereas previously they had to get off at the mainline station and walk into town. It's also created new journey opportunities to attractions in the Don Valley. I can well remember travelling on it one day when several groups of school children got on it who'd been to an event. So schools in Rotherham had picked up on this opportunity to get to these events easier, and it's also provided new park and rides so that particularly can avoid actually having to drive into the centre of Rotherham to catch a train. But some people say if you have to do park and ride, you've failed because you haven't covered the last mile. But that's the next step. The fact that we've actually had well, up until COVID, had more people using the park, more using the park and ride facilities than we've been able to provide for, demonstrated the success. So more facilities will need to be provided. And of course, you can have a direct interchange with heavy rail trains on the main line section. And it's opened up new employment and education and leisure opportunities for a fairly depressed area. So those are the sort of things I think we need to take in mind when looking at new schemes. So heavy rail and hybrid operation is something that we've been spending a lot of time looking in. The examples there, Aarhus in Denmark, where they've recently opened a tram train scheme, and it's one that we want to look at as a kind of test case. And also the other one that all the pioneers of that were Karlsruhe, and we've got a good relationship with them, and we've learned a lot from them. But I think it's worth expanding our UK knowledge through international systems, and to do that, we've become members of UITP and are actively involved in the Light Rail Committee and the Regional Suburban Railways Committee, which gives us opportunity to often to talk to these operators and get to see them. And then just re-emphasizing the public interface, whether you have, can we do simpler level crossings, as in the pictures on the left. One's in the Isle of Man. It's sort of basically made of homemade material and using traffic lights rather than the sort of full-blown wig-wag that we have to do. And the other examples in the Netherlands, where it's really a very simple barrier that's just to prevent people walking in front of the train. And in the other one is the trespass protection measure we put in at Rotherham because of the low platforms, really to sort of prevent people trying to cross the tracks. But as we've discovered, they don't. The only incidents of people using the crossing from one platform to another have been from the high level platforms, which kind of suggests that the fence isn't really necessary, but we felt it was important that people knew the difference. So that was a solution that we came up with, and it's been very successful. And then managing interfaces. 3 examples here. We've got some outtakes from the Skyfall simulation that we've done, showing the car on the train interface options, and also an example of the way the shared section would work, where you've got your cliff, your catch pit for the rocks, the railway, and then the section for another segregated section for walkers and cyclists. Then we've also got the park gates interface on Sheffield, and Tyne-Aware Metro access, and a photo of the very simple changeover that you've got on Manchester Metrolink as you approach Altrincham from Timperley, which is simply a reminder to press your TRTS button so the signalman knows you're on your way. That's one of the key things, is getting the right communication system between the control centres to operate the signalling if you've got it. If you're operating on line of sight, or if you're changing over from line of sight, you've got, it helps you to work your way through that. So with that sort of very rushed view of the technical issues and benefits that light rail may give us. So what's the important thing that we've got to consider now? Well, I think with rail reform coming up and GBR, is there an opportunity now to make a much better integrated approach to rail solutions as part of a whole system public transport solution? Can we get the best of both worlds between light and heavy rail, and also integrate with other transport modes? So can we make the interchange simpler? Can we improve journey opportunities? So, for example, be able to get a whole journey ticket which covers all modes, including light rail, and that would make life simpler when you do get a service that operates across boundaries, and also the timetable should be one that works for people, and this is a big important issue that's being debated at the moment because of the travel pattern change. Is, where do we need the trains, at what time and how long, particularly if commuting has changed and people and it's more people going out at leisure time, you know, do peak fare rates need to still apply and things like that? Some examples of sort of reasonable integrated ticketing and cross mode operation. London in the UK does it quite well, and others, Manchester sort of aspires to it, but doesn't. There's still, unfortunately, in both barriers between their own systems and heavy rail. Stockholm has slightly better option. Karlsruhe is good too, and Paris. I say, but all of them, there's still this barrier between the heavy rail systems and the local systems, and but in Switzerland, of course, that you've got ticketing that you can use across all modes, and they have a very good arrangement for making sure that they all, you know, the ongoing mode connects with the trains. And you know, it's a model that, you know, we could probably spend some time looking at. So again, what else can the approach utilize our infrastructure better? Well, one of the things we looked at in terms of tram train was, can it sort of help us to get around the problem at certain pinch points, and stations like Leeds, Manchester Piccadilly, and Glasgow Central all demonstrate very clearly that if you were to take local services out onto the street, you could free up platforms for expanding the longer distance services. Other examples probably exist, but those are three that stood out straight away. And the only one that's actually got a tramway is Manchester. Leeds has been trying to get one for years, and the new proposals for West Yorkshire, we hope, will bring that about. Glasgow have also got a sort of mass transit proposal on the table, and we're, you know, obviously waiting for Transport Scotland to decide whether they can afford to do that. So both those cities may see trams and tram trains in the future. So obviously, if people pick up these solutions, we can improve the connectivity into there and within the cities. And if we're using old alignments, we can minimise the sort of construction issues, because if you've got an alignment there, then you don't need to demolish too much. Again, that applies now, you know, wherever the infrastructure, using old railway infrastructure if you can, clearly gives you a much better option than building new. Obviously, there will still be some places where you need to build new, because with looking at some of the Restoring Your Railway schemes, the old alignment has been built over, so therefore a new alignment is required, which again makes light rail more attractive, because you can wriggle around these obstacles a lot easier with a tramway, because you can have much tighter curve radii. So you don't need so much extra land take to solve the problem. You can also, of course, decide to go on street as well, which can help. Also, if you're going to do, you can also look at making a common user vehicle to get better use of your vehicle, a cost-effective vehicle fleet. So, for example, if once Manchester's got all its tram train schemes in place, then would a fleet of tram trains operating both the Metro link, the tram train schemes, and the remaining heavy rail services being more cost effective than having three fleets, i.e. trams, tram trains, and the mainline trains. However, we've obviously got to have an inclusive safety management system for all the rail modes, and we'd hope this will lead to better accountability. So what do you do about all this? Well, we could do with integrated teams with light and heavy rail schemes, and that needs to be everywhere. You know, from the DFT through Great British Railways transition team, UKTram promoters, and of course Network Rail and other operators and managers, infrastructure managers. RSSB and LRSSB need to develop the supporting standards and guidance to avoid having to keep applying for deviations to make shared operation work, or indeed and to plug the gaps in the light rail standards at the moment. That is a major piece of work that is going on both at the ISO and CEN level as well as locally, and it's a long job, I'm afraid, because developing a standard is not a 5-minute job. It takes a lot of work, as anybody who's been on a CEN working group or a UK standards working group will know. But it's critical that we get these in place, and obviously we need the skills to do that. So we need to encourage graduates and others and apprentices into this part of the industry, and get them give them the skills of both light and heavy rail, and understand the similarities and the differences, so we have a new generation of rail professionals who can take this forward. Developing partnerships is key as well. Often Network Rail is seen as the enemy rather than the friend, in spite of years of trying to get it. But we're here to work with everybody else to try and bring these solutions to. And our light rail team has been working very hard to do that. Not only is you know, through UKTram, but also through the Restoring Your Railways working group that the DFT have set up. We've been heavily engaged in that, and so with what we're doing, the time is right for GBR to make this framework an inclusive part of the structure of their reform as they endeavour to implement the Grant Chap's recommendations. And so what next? Well, we submitted a paper to as part of the consultation for GBR. I prepared it on behalf of UKTram and Network Rail. That was and it was endorsed by Peter Hendy. And the good news is that after what seems like an eternity, we have been approached by senior people from the transition team to discuss how we take this forward. So that's really encouraging that they've started to see that an integrated approach, and it's particularly important in my book because if you are going to extend urban systems such as, you know, through tram, train, or other, then how does that fit in with the existing sort of franchise service model, fares model, and everything else? There's a lot of work to be done, but it really does need to happen. And this is presented to DFT. We've gone through it with the new light rail team at the DFT, who are very supportive as well. And when the railway development group sort of sort their new reorganisation out, then I think we'll have further discussions with them. But in the meantime, we work with the scheme promoters to take these things forward, and in some cases it's making them aware of what they can do, because very often particularly a Restoring Your Railway promoter, you know, the whole concept of light rail or tram train is is outside their radar, whereas actually when you look at the proposed scheme, it's actually makes a lot of sense. So there's education to do with them, sort of almost hold their hands through the process so they understand why it will work. And we'll continue to issue challenge statements out to the industry through RYR to reduce costs, enable more innovation, and get the right solution for each situation. So the support available to you, or some of it, is, well, there's the award-winning learning hub that we've created from the Tram train scheme in Sheffield, which is now rapidly becoming a learning hub for the wider light rail experience. It's available free of charge to anybody in the industry, but you have to request access because of the licensing arrangements of the platform. So the email to, if you're interested in signing up to that, then if you send an email to the address on the screen, that will be arranged for you. And if you want to talk to anybody, then within Network Rail, there's myself in the technical authority, and in the system operators light rail knowledge team, we've got Simon Coulthard, who heads that up, and also the senior sponsor for the Sheffield trial, and Alex Dodds, who's not only developed the learning hub as our operations specialist for Sheffield, and as a team we worked with a lot of the new proposed schemes. And in UKTram, the Centre of Excellence is your point of contact, and Colin Roby is the chair of that, and he'd be very pleased to hear from any of you if you've got any queries that you believe the Centre of Excellence can help with. I want to know what award the hub won. It was the project under £50 million at last year's Light Rail Awards, and we're very pleased with that, as you can probably imagine. So with a short time to go, thank you very much, and I'll take some questions. Apologies for the technical issues at the beginning. I really don't know what happened.
No issues. So first question from Richard, and it's asking around what does the technical authority do to influence the interface between light rail and other solutions, particularly the last mile, things around cycle paths, etc. And then there's a sort of a quote around Netherlands will always include this in their development. Have you got any thoughts on that?
I do. I think this is something we need to build on. It certainly should be part of the way Great British Railways sort of centre start thinking when new schemes are put on the table, because I think it's a very important element of getting people to use public transport and to get healthier. Because if you've got cycleways and walking routes, then you know that's better for you in two ways. One is it keeps you fit, and the other is you're not sort of constantly sort of being surrounded by sort of polluting road vehicles. So I don't think we do enough of that at the moment, and I think it's something that we've got to bring in as part of the new organisation. At the moment, I think it's something that I could say that we do look at that in through the route map we produced for developing schemes in the UKTram Centre of Excellence, and that's being hooked up with a similar tool on the DFT have provided. So there's stuff out there, but I think it's not well known enough at the moment, and I don't. And whilst we've got people within the technical authority who could think about and help on those issues, that they're currently sort of I suppose tied up with other work because we haven't been sort of pushed down that road. But that's where we've got to go.
Thanks, Ian. Got a question from Peter. He starts by thanking you for the talk, and then he just wants a question around how do the vehicle interface, the vehicles, and how they share other infrastructure like trams with light rail and heavy rail operation, and how does that break system compatibility, crashworthiness requirements?
It's managed by the process of risk assessment and compliance with the relevant standards. The crashworthiness standard has a level of crashworthiness for mainline vehicles, tram train vehicles, tram vehicles, etc. And so if you're operating vehicles with different levels, or the vehicles are compliant to those levels, then you look at the other measures that you can take to prevent the vehicles getting in each other's way, which is essentially looking at your train detection and protection systems. What we did in Sheffield was to put TPWS at every signal. Experience suggests that that's probably was over the top, but it was the best solution available at the time. On time and where you've got two train stop systems on the main line, on the Sunderland line, you've got our TPWS and you've got their Indusi system. So that's another way of doing it. It's a bit top heavy. I think there's a lot, there's scope for developing a better model of so either signalling or track-based protection, rather than having the vehicle to solve all the infrastructure problems, particularly in the sort of train detection and department. We've done a lot of work on it. It's working very well. And if you go to the European schemes, you can see again it works. I mean, there are very few. I can't even think of any instance where a tram train has been hit by a heavy rail train or vice versa. You've got a much worse problem with red light jumpers at level crossings, or road crossings as they are on tramways. If people ignore traffic lights and drive in front of a tram, they expect consequences, really.
Thank you for that. Anybody got any other questions? There's no more in the chat, but do somebody want to put their hand up? They can come off mute and ask a question. No hands up at the moment. Ian. Oh, here we go. So Andy's got his hand up. Go ahead, Andy. I think you might be doing the.
Cheers, Ian. Thanks, Ian, for the chat. It was really interesting. It's something I've never really sort of sat and considered. So thanks for raising awareness about it. Just Ian, if we could just have a bit of a round of applause for Ian and his talk, that'd be great.
Yeah, thanks, Andy. Well, I think really worthwhile presentation. That was really good. Yeah, electronic hands. That's something new, isn't it?
Well, I'm glad it's appreciated, but I think it's a very important step forward in the way we go with the railways, and I'm doing my best to push hard to make sure something happens before I retire.
Does look like it is definitely moving forward, isn't it? That's
Certainly
great.
Is.
Brilliant.
Yes, we've got Simon Coulthard and myself are meeting with Elaine Seagriff from GBRTT in a couple of weeks' time. So it's really, someone's taking notice, and I know too that I've got the ear of Peter Hendy if I feel we need to push it harder, and that's always a comfort.
Sounds good. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much.